Welcome to Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode Fandom. My name is Wilder Adams, and we are in the thick of the offseason, and we're using this episode to really reflect on the state of the Minnesota Timberwolves as there's literally nothing going on in the NBA world. I'm with my good friend Andrew Dukowitz, who covers the Minnesota Lynx and the Minnesota Timberwolves. So, Andrew, first of all, how's life been?
Good, man. Got back from Vegas and have been in full Lynx mode. So it's nice to get on a pod where we're talking Timberwolves because probably 95% of the pods have been Lynx. So this will be fun.
Oh my goodness, I could only imagine because while everybody else around town feels to be really focused on the Vikings and the Timberwolves, like I just mentioned, there's nothing going on besides, jersey announcements and 2K rating reactions, all of that stuff. You're still out here, man, working with the Minnesota Lynx. And how's that grind been, first of all? Just kind of going on all those podcasts and shows and just being out because the Minnesota Lynx are pretty killer right now.
Yeah, man, it's been good. I joined up with the Hitting the Hardwood guys, Mitch Hansen over at Canis Hoopus and Terry Horseman from the Next, and we started a podcast network. So if you're a Lynx fan that's tuning into Wilder Wolves, I do a post-game live / turns into a podcast after every Lynx game. Cheap plug, but it's been good. The Lynx are such a different vibe from the Timberwolves. Like the Timberwolves, you have your Johnny Krasinski, you have your Jace Fredericks, your Chris Hines, the Britt Robinsons and Dane Moores of the world that kind of have been on the beat for 5 to 20 years. The Lynx aren't like that. This was my second season covering them as a credentialed reporter, and I'm probably third in hierarchy already. So it's a good way to just get reps in. The players are awesome. They don't kind of I explain it to people as like the players want media there, whereas a lot of the times with the Wolves or with the NBA, the players don't really want to talk to you. It's more of just like a contract obligation. So it's a more friendly vibe, I'd say. Not to say the Wolves aren't friendly, but the Lynx are very, very friendly. And then you get to talk to Cheryl Reeve every day, which anytime you're talking to a 4-time champion, Olympic gold medalist, Hall of Fame coach, it's always a good day.
You can never complain about that. And I mean, the Minnesota Lynx are pretty much always really good at basketball. So I'm not sure historically we get a lot of preparation for covering good basketball through the Minnesota Lynx, but feels like we're kind of getting that transition with Lynx to the Timberwolves translation. Of course, they made that major trade the other week, right? Landing Carrington. And I always joke about this, like the Minnesota Lynx as like an NBA junkie are like my wet dream for like the Timberwolves, because not only are they the best team in the league, but they also might get the number one pick. And what you explained before the show, a legitimate super draft. You want to talk
Yeah.
about that real quick?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to lay it out for the Lynx, they are the number one team in net rating by about 3 points, which is about the difference between like the second best team and the seventh. And then they have the number one defensive rating by 3 points, which is about the difference between the second and the eighth best team. Having both of those means their net rating is double the number two team. So they are the best team in the league by like a lot. Like their net rating is 14-ish. Next best team is in the sevens, and then it goes down from there. So best team in the league, Nafisa Collier is the odds-on favorite to win the MVP. So they have the
And
best
DPOY.
player. Yep, she is the defensive player of the year from last season and currently leads the WNBA in scoring and is almost shooting 50, 40, 90. So she's probably going to win the MVP, barring, she comes back from her ankle injury with good health and gets a few more games in. But the Lynx have a 6.5 game lead over the second seed. Might not even need to bring her back. Anyways, so all of this good things for the Lynx. They also own the Chicago Sky's number one pick for next year. Chicago is currently the second worst team in the league. They have lottery odds, but the Lynx basically are looking at a top 3 pick, potentially after winning a championship. And their CBA ends after this season. So the current rule that requires you to be a certain age to enter the WNBA as an American that goes to college or a foreign player that goes to college, might be ripped up and it might change to 20, which is kind of the number I've been hearing. And if that happens, the Lynx could have a top 3 pick in a draft that has 3 draft class worth of talent in it. And it just doesn't seem fair. You mentioned the Dejanay Carrington trade. So Lynx, top ranked defense, and they traded away a bench player in Diamond Miller that wasn't getting any time for Dejanay Carrington, who was the most improved player last season and the all defensive first team guard. And she's coming off the bench. So again, it just doesn't seem fair.
And by the way, the Minnesota Lynx are the same basketball team that was owned by the owner of the Timberwolves, Glenn Taylor. So I'm trying to figure out like how there's such a big contrast between how one team and the other team are ran, because Minnesota, on one hand, they're the worst team in the NBA ran historically, with the Timberwolves, and the Lynx easily the best. I've never understood how both things could be true at once.
Part of it is just the financial aspect, like owning a WNBA team. The entire payroll and staff payroll is probably like $2.5 million. So for Glenn Taylor to flip $2.5 million into a, coin machine, pretty good odds you're going to get your return on investment. Cheryl Reeve has been the head coach and very involved in basketball operations her entire time here, and she is excellent at what she does. The other thing is Glenn Taylor kind of took a proactive approach to, I'll put it this way. When they made Mayo Clinic Square, when they made this new, multi-million-dollar facility where the backboards and the shot clocks tell you if your shot arc is off, and they have analytical data on every TV in the practice facility, they made the decision to share that with the Lynx. So the Lynx have one of the most high-tech facilities. And just to touch on Dejanay Carrington again, she went from playing in Connecticut, where they practice at a YMCA essentially, to playing in Dallas, where they practice at a college campus. And practice last week actually got canceled and then delayed because there was a graduation ceremony going on at the same time as their practice, to walking into a facility where they have a breakfast bar and build your own omelets. I mean, there's a reason the Lynx are winning, and it's a lot of it is because they are just doing the little things like training, making players feel at home. And it means a lot for free agents, which the Wolves, their facility isn't, by NBA standards, is still pretty top notch. And I think we're going to start seeing that now with Anthony Edwards turning into a star, that there's going to be free agents that are looking at it and going like, well, I would like build your own omelets when I go into work.
It's pretty funny that you mentioned that, because you're mentioning like the Mayo Clinic Square has a lot of good things going for it. And by no means, I am no expert on the comparing and contrast of NBA facilities relative to WNBA facilities, but it does seem like the Lynx, their reputation is they got some of the top stuff overall in the WNBA, from the stadium they get to play in, the practice facility. And on the other hand, the Timberwolves, they have this reputation that everything could use a significant upgrade, but they're both using the same facilities. So it's kind of like, it's cool that the Lynx have NBA access, but it's also sort of sad that the same facilities is used as one standard for the NBA, and that's relatively low. And the Lynx, it's like that high, and it's the same stuff. It just shows the contrast in facilities. But I want to go right into the Minnesota Timberwolves right now, into the meat of the episode. And this offseason, we go from Kevin Durant and, maybe De'Aaron Fox, depending on what happens with the San Antonio Spurs, and nothing's happened, Andrew. And we got some good extensions this summer. Naz Reid's back. Julius Randle's back. Shout out Johnny Juzang, man, like UCLA legend. But there's nothing that has been just significant on the finals front in terms of big acquisitions. So I just want to hear, what's been your takeaway on the current state of the offseason for Minnesota?
Yeah, it's refreshing when a GM tells you exactly what they want to do and then they just do that. Tim Connolly at his end of the season presser said they wanted to err on the side of continuity, bringing people back, giving Chris Finch a full off season to kind of fit Dante and Julius in better, give Julius a full chance to learn the offense and kind of get the hang of everything even better. And that's what they did. I mean, I'll be honest, the stuff I heard behind the scenes on Kevin Durant was that there really wasn't a whole lot to it, that during the season he was really interested in coming here and the Wolves were interested in bringing him in. But then after they finished the season so strong and made the Western Conference Finals, I mean, even the stuff that like leaked out saying they were offering Shannon and Dillingham, I just really don't believe it. I mean, it makes sense for Phoenix to leak that out because they can try and get that last little bit of value from Houston, but I don't think the Wolves were ever in on it. De'Aaron Fox, I kind of get the same vibe that they're just not really that interested at this time. Um, it's been interesting. I mean, sometimes boring is interesting. And to me, this made the most sense because next year they are going to be in a little bit better position to trade. Julius will be an expiring extension. Rudy will be an expiring extension. Dante will be an expiring extension. They'll just have better trade chips. So why not just run it back, give Ant a little bit of continuity and see what they can get? I know the point guard topic will obviously come up on this pod, but I just get the feeling they really want to give Rob Dillingham the chance. I mean, he is an 8th overall pick. I've been a fan of his game since they drafted him, but his flaws are just glaring. I mean, turnovers are really tough. I mean, when you're averaging more turnovers like in summer league, what I'll say is his trend in turnovers is not getting better. I mean, college they were bad, first year they were bad, summer league they were bad. He's gonna have to figure that out if he wants to be a starting point guard. But the Wolves, I think, are confident in saying, "Hey, we don't have 2 new guys to train in on like our lingo for plays. Let's let Rob at least run a little bit at the beginning of the year."
And you mentioned it. We were going to talk about the point guard position. So let's just address the elephant in the room. And it is really interesting because, like you mentioned, sometimes no noise is also noise.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like, comparing it to the Vikings, because everybody's like, are they going to get Daniel Jones back, Sam Darnold? Are they going to sign Aaron Rodgers? In the Timberwolves, it's like, will they go all in for De'Aaron Fox or trade for Malcolm Brogdon? And at this point in August, rarely any big moves happen from here on to the season. So I'm not expecting any big moves right now. I'm not the reporter you are right now, but that's just my read, and I'm reading it's also your interpretation as well. I think this is a great thing if you are a Timberwolves Rob Dillingham believer, because this team's to back-to-back conference finals. There's a lot of pressure on this team, and Minnesota has shown zero fear of making big trades for the last 10 years, really, but especially in the Tim Connolly tenure. And they didn't make a trade for a point guard. They didn't go after anybody. And like you said, they want to give him the leash. And this is the guy they traded. Speaking of big trades, they traded a future first-round pick to acquire, and he showed struggles in summer league, showed progress. The turnovers went down over time, it felt like. So there's some good things there, and he's got a really high ceiling. So what's your confidence level that he can actually deliver and be a starter? And also like the Mike Conley front, we'll talk about that soon.
Yeah, well, I'll save this to Rob only until you ask me about Mike. But
Yep.
I it's tough because the things that Rob Dillingham struggles with are things that take time, right? His 3-point jumper, well, it was fairly effective at Kentucky. His shot release still isn't great. I mean, it looks good in practice. He looks confident shooting at practice, gets into the game. There's still a leg kick. There's still kind of this weird release with his hands where it's just not in the same spot every time. And that takes time. I mean, when you've shot the basketball the same way for 18 years and now all of a sudden you're having to change it, takes time. And Finch kind of talked about it at the end of the year of like, that's something they really look for. Cause if you can have the same release point on your shot, you're better at making those off kilter or off balance shots. You're better at kind of getting to your spots because you're not having to square up every time. Like for a guy like Rob, that's important. The turnovers as well. This isn't 2005 anymore. You don't come into the NBA and as a point guard, they're not just running two bigs in the middle and three guard or three wing defenders and matching you up. You have to distinguish what they're doing off of the pick and roll. You have to distinguish how they're trapping you at half court. You have to figure out if they're going into a zone or a hybrid. Like that's hard. And really the only way to get that experience is game time. And again, Rob went to Kentucky and was the sixth man off the bench. Like he just hasn't had a lot of time to decipher that stuff. So when I'm looking at him, he has elite level handles. His court vision, I would say, is by far the best on the Wolves. Like his read ability of, you know, defender sagging in, this guy's going to be open in this spot is next level. He just needs to have his brain catch up to where it's, I can't make that pass. All of these guys are world athletes. I can't make that pass because they're doing something different on the baseline. And only time will tell, which is kind of a non-answer, but at the same time, I'm confident that he's worth giving that time to.
I totally agree. And to add to the Rob Dillingham front, it kind of reminds me, not to throw like a comparison out there, very similar to like a younger and much shorter LaMelo Ball, where it feels like the creativity, the flash, and the raw gifts and touch, you get a certain place of those things. And then at a certain point, it's okay, we have to catch up to the athletes of the NBA, like you're saying. You have to catch up to the fact that, you know, windows close faster, both off the dribble and in terms of just finding open teammates. And you also have to consider the synergy, you know, the personnel of your own players while also making those reads. I think that's where a lot of the turnovers come from. And that early stretch in January, I always find so interesting because he was not turning over the ball that much in that stretch. And he was hitting tough shots off the dribble. And I think that's a great sign for Minnesota that he can get there. But based on what we saw in Summer League, based on where this is going, I'm not sure how you approach the point guard position in a championship context. I'm not sure how you view what you look at the point guard position between Rob Dillingham and Mike Conley and confidently say that this team is going to contend at a maximum level because you need point guard play in the Western Conference. Simple as that. You're playing against Shea, you're playing against Luka. I mean, Houston, they don't have like they have Fred, they have Ahmed Thompson. I mean, obviously Jokic is a point guard. There's a lot of point guard dynamics out in the Western Conference. So it makes me really think just at this point of the offseason, I'm not sure if I'm looking at this Timberwolves season in terms of like contention at this point is the number one emphasis. Because if it was, in my opinion, as much as you like Rob Dillingham as a fan base, we all love Rob Dillingham. I don't think it's fair to say, cool, he's going to be the point guard. And I've been fully on the Terrence Shannon starting train. Not sure if you're contending that's also the right move. Or Dante and all of these options. Mike Conley, we could talk about him soon. I'm wondering, because you mentioned the contracts, all the movable contracts on this team. This offseason feels like a flexibility offseason more so than anything to me, which was the first part of the Karl Anthony Towns trade, in my opinion. The flexibility. So I just want to ask you, considering those points, how much has this offseason been about, in your opinion, the long-term flexibility compared to just contending right next year?
I think it was mostly about the long-term flexibility. I mean, Julius Randle, well, we would love him to be the player he was in the playoffs and to close the season. It's just still, unknown if he's going to start the season that way. Naz Reid, I think, is probably a wolf for life at this point. Like, I got to talk to him a little bit in Vegas, and the in passing is he's acutely aware of what he means to this city. But I mean, I think it was a table setting move of we have Naz, we have Jaden, we have Ant as our core. How can we maximize next season without mortgaging the future? Because if you do trade for a De'Aaron Fox and he doesn't work out, you're done. Like that's your move. That's your swing. If you were to trade for a Kevin Durant and he gets injured, you're done. That's your swing. This way, I think it's, I mean, I'll be pretty frank. I think this Wolves team is going to roll through the regular season. I think they'll probably be a 2 or the 3 seed going into the playoffs. And then it's, you're an injury away from making the Western Conference Finals again. But next offseason, I think, is the offseason to look at for those big trades. Rudy as an expiring, Randall as an expiring, another year of, Ant, Jaden, and Naz. You'll know what TJ is. You'll know what Jalen Clark is. And we'll know what Rob is. So you'll get a little bit more finality on the young guys while also making like that Rudy Gobert contract a lot more appealing than it was this offseason.
I think we're both on the same page here. And it's funny because it feels like in a lot of ways the same approach going into last year as the Karl Anthony Towns trade.
Mm-hmm.
Because the cat trade, I think all of us read it as this is a lower ceiling move for next year, most likely, but the potential optionality that it would present. And I think as we've learned with the new CBA dynamics, that optionality is really important. And that's why I've been such a big supporter of what Tim Connolly has done this offseason. Because if you don't have a tier 1 superstar like Anthony Edwards outside of him, or outside of your Jason Tatum, your Luka or Shea, it feels like the next best thing is to have a complimentary level star or a super mega like niche role player making 25 to 35 million. That's starting to feel like the sweet spot. And the Timberwolves right now got 4 of those.
Yep.
It used to be a question like Minnesota's contract situation with Cat, Rudy, Ant felt too front heavy. And now it's feeling like Minnesota has 4 contracts they can flip around. And how valuable, because you're talking about like next offseason, how valuable do you think it is that they're able to get those 4 players on those type of deals in the last 12 months?
Well, even like this season, let's say Rob is just a disaster and it is apparent 10 games into the season that Rob is not the answer. I mean, Rob makes $8 million. You can pair him with Rudy and now you're at 45. Now you can go big game hunting. If you pair Rob with Naz, which again, I'm pretty firm on, I don't think Naz is going anywhere. I think he's probably pretty close to untouchable. But like you pair Rob with Naz, now you're at $40 million again. Like that's the important part when you're looking at trades is how can you get to $40 million without giving up 15 cheap contracts? Because I think what we've learned is the last place you want to be is Phoenix, where you have 2 really expensive contracts and then a bunch of just vet minimum guys. I think you want to be closer to like where the Wolves are, where you have Ant, who at some point is going to make a historic amount of money, but then you have 4 or 5 guys that are in that middle land. And especially when you have a guy like Ant. I think that, teeing it up for the future, I mean, it goes kind of the same way next offseason where Rudy's making $38 million. You're not going to be second apron this season. So you theoretically can add a pick in, or you can trade in some of those younger guys with Rudy, and he's just so much easier to move. I really think it was a smart bet by Tim that just bringing everyone back, having that continuity will get us to a point where we're going to have a chance. And then you're an injury away. I don't think anyone's going to sit here today and say the Wolves are beating Oklahoma City in 7 games. I don't think Houston's beating Oklahoma City in 7 games. But if Dort goes down with a hamstring at the wrong time, all of a sudden you have a chance. If Chet goes out, you have a chance. And I think that's what the Wolves are going with this season, which, I mean, for all the bad basketball we watched out of the Timberwolves for the last 20 years, I don't know. I'll take we have a superstar talent, a really good team, and we have a chance over most of the other seasons we've had.
What I think you're explaining is like the total NFL team mentality that we're kind of seeing right now in the NBA. And I think Minnesota's following. It's the let's just get into the room and see what happens. I
Yep.
think I think it's a great thing. We're talking about, I'm not sure this team has a point guard. I'm not sure if the young players are ready. And we're still talking about this team like the floor is so dang high, regardless of how those guys look, which I kind of want to like take a step back on, because if none of these guys show up, if Dillingham doesn't show up, if Shannon and Clark don't show up, I do think this team takes a step back significantly, because you're also down to Keel. But I also think that with what we've seen so far, every sign we've seen is that Terrence Shannon looks ready. Rob Dillingham is showing signs. It feels like he might be in a good direction. If this team, the position this year is, we're just going to be really good because our veterans have such a high floor, and some of our high floor guys are young players like Naz and Jaden, and they're getting better. They're pushing up to that playoff spot. And then now it's just like we get into the right rooms and see what happens. That feels very NFL to me because like you said, if Chet or Dort or somebody gets hurt, then all of a sudden things get even if things go the right way. So
What I'll say quick is I think even if like Rob's bad and even if like TJ isn't showing up in Jalen, I mean, they won 49 games last year, which is great. I think it's easy to forget how bad it was at the beginning of the season, whether it's Rudy getting a ball hucked at him from Julius or Julius not passing at him. Dante talked about it, and Coach Finch talked about it after the season, that he never had a role. They were changing pretty much his entire offensive skill set on a week-to-week basis to try and figure out what to do with him. And that's why it looked terrible, like for quite some time at the beginning of the season. I think having a full off season where Julius is, in town, Jaden and Naz are both in town, Ant's been working nonstop in Atlanta, Jalen, TJ are both in town, like having a full off season to actually develop a playbook and a scheme and continuity of rotations. And coming into this season, I think they're going to be really good. Like I would be surprised if they don't win like 55 games. Again, I think Oklahoma City is probably a 60-win team, but given the turnover Denver has had, given the turnover Houston has had, the Lakers have, they'll have an offseason with Luka and LeBron and brought in DeAndre Ayton. I think the arms race is definitely happening, but I just have so much belief in one Ant coming back as ridiculously better. I think Jaden and Nas have a chance to come back quite a bit better. And then just if you could cut the October to December Timberwolves out and just run it from January to April, this was an awesome team. Like top 10 offense, top 10 defense, blowing teams out of the water. I think they're going to be really good. I would be hesitant to say they'll take a step back.
I love the way you articulated that. The one point that you made that was so good, especially all of them are good, but the one thing that was really good.
This isn't me being a fan, by the way. If I was betting, and the Wolves over is anything other than like anything under like 53, I would take that over in a heartbeat. Like they are going to come in hot.
And we saw the continuity, what year one to year two with the Cat Rudy tenure did. They went from 42 wins to 56 wins. And if you, like you said, you crop out that January and on team, that was basically the same team as the year before for the Timberwolves, but a little deeper, a little more well-rounded. I think it's such, I think you made a great point. It's going to be such an exciting year on all fronts. And where do you think Minnesota, because you kind of talked about the turnover between Houston and Denver and some of the other teams trying to fight for a spot. If you had to rank where Minnesota ranks in the West right now, where would you put them?
I'd put them at 2, like pretty firmly at 2. I think Oklahoma City is one large gap. Then you probably have the Wolves at 2, Denver and Houston like 3-4, and then just a Mod Podge of teams from 5 to 11. But I just think, when all is said and done, they still have Anthony Edwards, who is likely going to be a top 5 player in the NBA next season. They are going to have Jaden and Rudy, who are both defensive masterclasses. They're going to have a 4-time All-Star in Julius Randle coming off of an offseason where he didn't have a shoulder injury. Rudy's also not playing Euro ball. Ant's not doing anything this offseason. Like, I think they are going to surprise people at the beginning of the season by just how hot they start. Now, come playoffs, that's a different story. I don't know if come playoffs, if I'd still say they're the second best team. I think Denver has a chance to really rise. I don't think they'll have a better record than the Wolves, but I think they might be a better overall team by the playoffs than the Wolves. Houston kind of has that same potential. Like, if Kevin Durant gets kind of acclimated and is still the same guy he has been for his entire career, they're going to have a say at, we're the second best team in the West. But beginning of the season, I think the Wolves are going to come out and kind of prove that they deserve that spot.
All of you, what you're saying is lining up. It's hard to disagree. The early season, the continuity part of it is so important in November, December, January. But we all know this: November, December, January in basketball could be a lot of crap. There's a lot of trends that don't stay consistent at the end of the season. What do you think Minnesota can do with this current roster iteration to maintain that level of play that you're projecting for the first couple months of the year?
I think they got to, whether it's Rob ascending, whether it's Dante proving that he's more of like he's a good playmaker. He makes good decisions. He doesn't turn the ball over, but he's not like a shot creating point guard. He's not going to like set the table for other people. He's not going to get his own spot. So they need to figure out the point guard situation. If they want to be a really good team in April, at May, June, they got to figure it out. Whether that's Rob is just good, and by November we're talking, or by end of November we're talking about him starting instead of Conley. Whether that's Dante with a full off season with the playbook comes in and looks significantly better. Whether that's, there's also the possibility that Rob's just bad and they move him in November and bring in somebody. I think that's probably their biggest flaw. And it's hard because Mike, and I'll get into the Mike stuff briefly, and we can talk about it more if you want to, but Mike is so important to this team. Like, he will not be traded. He will be starting at the beginning of the season. They legitimately love him. Like, everyone on the team talks about, like, individually how much he's meant to them. The guys in the G League also talk about how they watch Mike Conley film like on loops to like get better at just basketball. He means a ton to the team. And to be honest, almost every player on the team, I think except for Jalen Clark and Josh Minot, if I'm remembering right, had a positive net rating playing with Mike as a 2-man group. So like, he still is a positive player, but come playoffs, it's pretty odd. The next worst point guard was Derek White, and that guy is a almost 1-6 man as the point guard. It's just tough if you're Mike and if he's your only point guard. Now, that being said, he is going to come into the season starting. He is going to be given a lot of responsibility still, but him and Finch both said that his minutes need to be closer to 15-20 because his body just can't handle it.
That's one part, because we talked about the tiers of OKC right now, and then it's probably Denver, Houston, Minnesota in some order. That would be the thing that I think pushes Minnesota to the bottom of that second tier, is if they put too much trust into a Mike Conley. I just can't get my mind off of the 4 points on 21% in the conference finals. I just can't do it. I'm sorry, everybody. Love Mike Conley. I can't do it. I don't trust it. I just can't, with the way he went from a very impactful starter the year before to being one of the worst starters in the league last year. That's just a hard truth. and it's the unfortunate truth. I'm wondering if this thing works, if this team works, Anthony Edwards might have to be the point guard. And that's the very intriguing yet super scary thing when talking about this team's trajectory, because I don't know about you, I haven't heard a peep from the Anthony Edwards camp this summer. The only thing we've heard about is Anthony Edwards running up floors at Target Field in the middle of July. And besides that, it's just been peep silent. How do you feel about Anthony Edwards and his progression next season, and how much of that needs to be as a primary point guard in the Shea mold?
I don't think he'll ever be a Shea level point guard. I mean, he doesn't have that natural feel for just reading a defense. Like, part of the reason Mike Conley is so good with Ant is because a lot of times Mike Conley helps explain what the defense is doing, and then Ant goes, "Oh, that makes sense," and then starts playing better. He even joked about Dante doing the same thing, where Dante will take him aside and be like, "Here's where the pressure is coming from. Here's where you need to go." Now, that being said, Ant was also not a natural shooter 2 years ago, and then had statistically the best non-hardened Steph volume 3-point shooting season ever. So I'm not ruling anything out that he could come in next year and just be Steve Nash, and then what do you do? But I think ideally, if you're looking at this Wolves team, his usage is probably in that 30 to 35% range, which is your Luka Doncic, your Giannis, your Jokic, like a heavy amount of decision making that he's in charge of. And if he's able to take that step, it does make a lot of things easier, because then Mike can just hide him on defense, throw him in the corner. He's a really good corner shooter. And like, he seems to rise to most occasions. You could also, like you were saying, start TJ. Dante could start next to him, and then you just have Dante coming off of pin downs. I think if I were to say what ideally could happen for this Wolves team, for me, it's Rob needs to be good, and not, he doesn't need to be great. He doesn't need to be a Hall of Famer. But if Rob can get you 30 minutes a night and score 15 points, 5 assists, and 1 turnover, like, that guy works so hard and tries so hard on defense, I think he'll hold up. That solves pretty much all the problems, because then you have a dynamic point guard that can create his own shot, run the offense. Ant can do Ant things. Mike's coming off the bench, and even though he wasn't a great point guard as a starter, I think most teams would kill for a Mike Conley off the bench. Rob's just got to be good, which that's the exciting part for this season, because you're looking at a guy that has all the confidence in the world. He worked his butt off behind the scenes last season. He has Pablo Prigioni as his personal kind of development coach with the Wolves. Chris Finch is a really good offensive coach, and you have Mike Conley, one of the best undersized point guards to ever do it. Everything's in place for him to be good. It's now just on him, which, what more can you want as a fan than seeing a guy prove everybody right or wrong? And for Rob, I mean, I think he relishes in this. I think he waited all last season for his chance, and it never really came because they were so good. And now he's going to get his chance. So he can kind of, put your money where your mouth is, or whatever. He's not betting money on this, but like, he's going to have this opportunity to show everyone, like, yeah, I was the 8th overall pick for a reason.
He might not be betting, but Malik Beasley might be betting. So maybe that's what's happening right now. But I think there's a lot of great points what you mentioned. I think, of course, if Rob Dillingham is really good at basketball and he could be a legitimate starter, a primary playmaker, it simplifies so many things, and you could do so many more things with Anthony Edwards, because Chris Finch always says that he loves having somebody who can make plays, because it puts Anthony Edwards in positions to be more efficient, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
he's a great shooter off the catch. Whenever he cuts, something good happens. Doesn't do it enough, but something good always happens with Anthony Edwards when he cuts. And I just think, with the way this team's going, and Oklahoma City is just going to be a juggernaut. They're not going away.
Yep.
They're not going away. I think for Minnesota, their internal development to get to that level, as much as I love Rob Dillingham, as much as I love Terrence Shannon, it has to start with Anthony Edwards might be the best player in the league. And
Yep.
that's even how as great as Anthony Edwards is, that is super hard to ask for when you're playing with in the same era as Jokic and an up and coming Wemby and even Luka to an extent and Shea and all these guys. But Anthony Edwards, if he just suddenly adopted B plus level playmaking, which is kind of what Shea is right now, because Shea in
Mm-hmm.
the playoffs, we saw even in moments, Shea is a good passer, but he's not playing 3D chess like Luka, and that got exposed at times against Denver at times, and especially against the Pacers. If Anthony Edwards can get to that level where he's just, I could be a primary playmaker, but then I can play off of a point guard, you're putting yourself in a position where you almost always can play in a spot where there's almost no flaw on the court. Because if Anthony Edwards can play make and you can throw Shannon on the court and you could throw Dante and these other guys, then suddenly it's like if playmaking is not a big issue in those lineups, then the size is an A. The defense can be an A. The athleticism, the spacing, all of it, it could be an A. And I think that optionality is how you compete against Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City, they add Hartenstein, they add, Alex Caruso, but they also moved off Josh Giddey because they bet
Mm-hmm.
on Shea Gilgeous-Alexander being a full-time point guard. And I think we're in this weird time with Minnesota basketball where we need that conversation. If Anthony Edwards can make that transition, and he didn't have the natural reps at point guard like Shea did at Kentucky, but if he can make those strides and be that level of playmaker, all of a sudden Minnesota's portability and its versatility with its lineups becomes right there with Oklahoma City. And that's how you could be a potential anecdote to a team like that.
Well, and with Ant, it's, I mean, he's in Atlanta right now. He's about to go on like a Chinese basketball tour with Adidas. I think Harden's going to be there too, actually. So that would be kind of interesting because
Jiggly Boy's out there too. Shout out to him.
Ant's path to being like a playmaker is probably like Harden's, where he goes from being a high volume kind of scorer to using that high volume scoring to set up other players. But like Ant, like Ant's working, and I haven't heard what he's working on because I think the team tries to give him some space in the offseason because like he's a busy guy. But I think anything's possible with that kid. I know kind of on his to-do list, if you want to say that Finch mentioned, was having more of a closing game where he has like a move to get, like a series of moves to get to. Like right now, the step back three and just kind of driving at the rim and throwing up a basket is his quote unquote bag. But having a more of a turnaround, more of a mid-range, a stop and pop, a different footwork, things like that. So that end of games, he has more of a series of things he can go to. I mean, the other thing was he was not great from the mid-range last year, which part of that is Julius, part of that is Rudy, like just taking up more space. But Ant needs to be a good mid-range shooter. Like it's the same thing with playmaking. If Ant all of a sudden is a threat on a post up in the mid-range, it opens up the corners because they're going to start sending help. I just think there's a lot of little areas that he can grow in. The other thing, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is Jaden and Naz both in this cat trade kind of got screwed at the beginning of the season. Um, you know, we heard all summer that Jaden had been working on his, driving game and kind of his post game and getting to the basket more. We heard all summer that Naz had really been working on his ball handling and trying to be a little stronger around the rim. And then the season started and we didn't see any of that from either of them until like February.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be that Jaden, what he did at the end of the season is repeatable. and Jaden is a 17-point a game scorer now. It could be that Naz Reid, there's going to be more ups than downs, and he's really worked on his ability to dribble and drive. And what we saw at the end of the season from Naz is repeatable, which if those two guys are both scoring 17 points a game, that's another way you can kind of match OKC's firepower a little bit. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I would love for all of that to happen at the same time, first of all. That would be my first option. But to finish the Edwards point right before we get there, you mentioned all the things like the mid-range, some of the pacing, your go-to spot in the playmaking. I think it's also, on one hand, so unfair to ask a 24-year-old to fix all of those in one summer. It might be one of those things where he fixes one at a time in the summers, and then by the time he's 27, that's when he's ready to maybe take the reins as one of the three best players in the world. That might be a few years away, and we'll know so much more once the season comes in and how Randall and Gobert fit into that equation. And if they need to flip one of those contracts, which they can with the way their money is. So I want to close the Edwards part on that. But to the Jaden and Naz thing, to spin it back to what I just said, the Gobert and Randall thing, one of the biggest things I'm going to look out for is by running this back, how much those players help or get in the way in Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels' development. Because I thought Jaden McDaniels' best basketball last year was in that January to February stretch. And the consistency there was one of those front court starters were out. And Jaden could play more like a traditional big in a lot of ways, a modern big, and play within 18 feet. But then, like you said, he ended the year shooting really strong from three in the playoffs, which is a trend over the years. So I'm really questionable on what Jaden McDaniels' offensive identity can be with Randall and Gobert in this iteration, because it feels like sometimes they're like, you got to shoot corner threes. Sometimes maybe you can do the things you want. Is Jaden McDaniels that much of a chameleon where he could be that consistent when asking all those different roles? I think that would ask for him to take a massive leap. If he can do that and be a 17-point per game scorer, whether he's asked to be in a corner or, play like a big, that's an all-star caliber player, period, point blank. So I think it's a lot to ask for him to be a consistent offensive player next year under Randall and Gobert. As much as I hope that could be a thing, I just question if this iteration is still going to be one that maximizes Jaden offensively. And similar to the Naz thing as well, he's just, as long as these guys are on the team, he's not going to start. And how does that affect, his how does that affect him? He's going to get starter minutes. How big of a deal is that? I honestly don't know, because for Kevin McHale, it didn't matter. For Manu Ginobili, it didn't matter. Can Naz Reid follow that line? I don't know. I think Naz Reid's a bigger question because he's so adaptable offensively. I feel better about him fitting off of those two front court players than Jaden McDaniels. But as we get to the late end of the show, what do you think just about what Jaden could be offensively? Because I'm still skeptical on this roster. He could be a consistent player on that end.
I think Jaden has a lot more to give than he allows himself to show. And what I mean by that is, like, coming out of high school, like, he was a gifted offensive player. Like, we saw those weird little, like, they're not hook shots, they're not floaters, they're like full out jump shots from 7 feet away that he made at a ridiculous clip last year. I mean, historically, he's a good, solid, I'd say he's a solid 3-point shooter. Like, it kind of waxes and wanes, but like his ability to hit corner threes and above the break threes is like pretty good. I really don't know what he can be. Like, he has a good handle. He doesn't have a lot of turnovers off the dribble. He has like a good spin move. He has a good drop step move that he shows every once in a while. But like around the Wolves, even like Finch has mentioned it, Ant has mentioned it, they have to like talk Jaden into doing more on offense, because he doesn't just grab it. He doesn't just say like, this is what I'm doing. So I think it's interesting, right? Because if Jaden, like, if he were to grab it and it were to go really bad, they'd probably never tell him to do that again. But if Jaden takes that step forward and he's now shooting 7 times at the rim and he's taking 3 corner threes and he's scoring 12 to 18 points a game, like that's like you said, he's then a 18 point a game, 8 rebound, 3 assists, all defensive first team caliber player. Like that's an all-star.
Yeah.
I just don't know if he's ready to take that step yet. I think the game is there. I think he's shown enough that like he could score if he wanted to. Like he's so big and like he's a legitimate like 7-foot guy that can move like Kevin Durant. Like he's so fluid with his running and his off-ball movement. If he ever just kind of took it and did it, I think it would be surprising to people of just how effective he could be around the basket in the mid-range. It's just, will he ever have the opportunity to do that? And will he ever do it? Because like you said, it's hard to get to the rim when Rudy Gobert's under the basket. It's hard to get in the mid-range when Julius is at the nail. I have a lot of confidence in Jaden. Like I'll be completely honest. I'm biased. Like I just genuinely enjoy the dude. So like I'm rooting for him as a person and as a fan and as a member of the media. But I do think there's a world where Jaden could be the third offensive option on this team behind Ant and Julius. And he's really good. I don't know, how that works with Rudy. The other thing I would say to your Naz Reid point is, I think the most important thing Finch is going to have to get buy-in again this year is doesn't matter who starts, whoever's hot closes. Because last year we saw Julius get benched in the fourth. We saw Rudy get benched in the fourth. We saw Reid get benched in the fourth. That has to maintain, because if there starts to be an ego with, Rudy and Julius are closing games or Naz and Julius are closing games, that 6th man spot that Naz has could get contentious real quick.
That was one of the biggest turning points of last year as well, because it felt like early in the year, it was all about getting Julius Randle in on things.
Yep.
And that's when you were mentioning earlier, Naz and Jaden got screwed in a lot of ways, because it went from you guys are about to have this big responsibility and play to your strengths. And now we're just fill the holes that come with starting Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert. And that's not necessarily either of those two strengths. And we saw those two gradually get better. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing with this team, keeping this iteration together. How much of that is like, okay, we'll make a move later, or is it we think this can actually gel together and we have this perfect unified world where Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels can play empowered and Julius Randle is fully bought in and Rudy Gobert isn't in the way of everybody? Is that world out there? I'm not sure. And to your point on Jaden McDaniels, is that world, does he need to know that he needs to take a leap for him to take that leap? And is that world here when we just know this team needs corner threes, much more of them than the starting lineup has to offer right now? I'm not sure. And there's so many questions about what leap Jaden and even Naz to an extent can take on this team as long as this iteration is fully together.
I think they're in a good spot regardless, though, right? Because they have Jaden, Naz, and Ant all locked up. They will be here after Rudy is gone, after Julius is gone. I mean, even if Julius plays another 4 years, they're still going to be here probably after Julius is gone. And that's your young core. So to your point earlier, I feel like this season is going to be a little bit of the taking away from Julius, Rudy, Dante, Mike, and giving to Ant, Jaden, Naz as kind of the future of this, the future core, if you will. I hate using the 2 timeline things, because like if you can win a championship, your timeline is out. There is no 2 timelines. But I mean, it's going to be, this season's going to be fascinating, because I think if they are as good as I think they will be in the regular season, there's this opportunity for them to keep all of the good parts and make that last trade next year, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if they're a 55-win team and they make it, let's say they make it to the second round or the Western Conference Finals again, I mean, there's a real opportunity that for them to keep. Mike retires, they free up salary that way. There's a real opportunity where they add a 2029 first round pick to Rudy and they throw Rob in there and get like a legitimately good point guard. And then the season after next season is their window is completely open. They're only replacing 2 rotation players instead of 3, and let's go. I think the hesitancy is, if those egos start to arise, which I mean, we'll do this. We'll spin it all the way back to the Lynx. The Lynx last season made it to the championship and they brought back 7 out of their top 8 minutes getters from the year before. And they have been a juggernaut championship favorite. If the Wolves do the same thing where they bring back those same players, they can avoid ego getting involved. They can avoid kind of that disease of me that Cheryl Reeve and Chris Finch both talk about. They could be at that point by the end of the season where this is just a well-oiled machine and they're going into the playoffs with Ant as a MVP favorite.
I think at this point, what I love about what we've done this episode is a lot of the topics we're talking about right now. I'm like 99% confident you're going to be back on this show and we'll be talking about the exact same things. And it's going to be like 10 times as tasty as it is right now because we're still figuring out like this state of the offseason and the Lynx are fantastic and the Vikings are getting started. It's just there's so many intriguing storylines by not making a move.
Yep.
Kevin Durant, if you bring in Kevin Durant, we know what this team is. We know it's now. It's not later. Right now, there's so many options. When you make the Western Conference Finals, you're a contender. I don't care what conference you're in. You're a contender. And right now, this team is balancing the fact that this team is a contender with also the fact that there might be a juicier second window if you maximize that second window. And how do you do that? How much can you use this season to build on into that? Does that get into the way of what's here right now? Can both of them come together, unify, and make this very intriguing contender that's also leveraging yourself for the future, which is truly the dream of every NBA team that you're winning now and you're building later. A lot of the time that's full of crap. And it's like, dude, just pick a decision. It doesn't feel done yet to me. And it's going to be so interesting to see what answers this upcoming season, once we get really into the gist of things, what answers those give us and how much better or worse do we feel about this current iteration and how that elevates the future iteration.
And the fun part about this season is we're going to get all those answers. We're going to know by probably early December if Rod Dillingham is ready to be a point guard in the NBA. We're going to know probably within the first 2 weeks of is Rudy Gobert giving up the FIBA basketball. Did that help? What did Ant work on? Is Julius really as happy as he's said he is and content to be here? Is Jaden taking a leap? Does Mike still have it? Like, we're going to get all of those answers. That's the best part about sports. There isn't really a lot of ambiguity. We will find out if they're good enough. But I just think, by staying pat, it made it a lot more interesting than if they would have just went out and traded for KD. Because like you said, then, you got Ant, you got KD, it's championship or bust. I know there's also a big segment of Wolves fans that is hurting right now without the big move because we saw it with KG. They made it to the Western Conference Finals and 3 years later he was traded and it's over. I just don't get that feeling from Ant. And call me crazy. I'm not going to say I'm not even in like the circle that gets to talk to the circle that's in contact with the circle that knows his inner circle. But like, that guy doesn't really lie about anything. And I think it really means a lot that he has a chance to win in Minnesota. I think it meant a lot that Minnesota took him first overall. And I think he's going to be here for at least the next 4 or 5 years. Now, let's be honest, could you see him after this next deal saying, "Hey, I want to go home and play in Atlanta. I don't want to stay here anymore"? Who knows? But at least the next 4 or 5 years, we have Anthony Edwards, and that gives you a chance.
Sometimes, and this applies to basketball, this applies to life. Sometimes you don't know the answer 4 or 5 steps down the road. Maybe you have to focus on steps 2 and then maybe 3. That doesn't mean you're in a bad spot.
Yes.
And by Minnesota, at this point of the offseason, which technically something can happen in 6 weeks. I never foresaw a Karl Anthony Towns trade happening 3 days before training camp. So this is just a state of the Wolves. Right? This is the state of the Wolves right before the state fair. That's what this is right now. And there's so much mystery, but there's no mystery that feels so concerning that your face just starts turning purple. Every scenario seems fine at the bare minimum. So the floor of this team just feels so much higher. And there's 2 different timelines right now, like you're managing, and both of them have like a title upside if everything goes the right way. And the question is, how do you best marinate this team for it to maximize the Anthony Edwards window? And Michael, my guy, or Andrew, I called you Michael.
I'm joining a Michael tomorrow at ESPN 1570, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. So we can just give Michael Schumacher a shout out for South Dakota ESPN radio.
my friend Michael was on the show 2 of the last like 3 episodes, and I think I went to straight programming on that, Andrew.
No offense taken.
No offense taken. Andrew, you're the best, man. I love seeing you in Vegas and just continuing to do what you do. We didn't know exactly where this episode is going to go today, but I love that it kind of spun into the Timberwolves window conversation. It makes it 10 times more fun. So, and Andrew, thank you so much for hopping on, my guy.
100%, man. Anytime you need a guest or want to talk Wolves, I'm here for you.
We'll do it, man. As we're still, I think we're a month away from everything really ramping up. And when that time ramps up, I am 100% certain we'll be, in similar circles communicating about the Wolves this season and on this show and et cetera, et cetera. Andrew, you're the best. Thank you so much. And thank you all so much for listening to this episode. This is the Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode Fandom.